Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video on my channel, Hairliciously. If you guys are new, please make sure to subscribe to stay updated on my second FUA hair transplant progress that I got from Motion Clinic in South Korea, as well as topics covering current hair loss treatments. You guys can check out the description box at the bottom of this video for a free consultation from Motion Clinic, and they are going to get you squared away with any questions you guys have pertaining to hair transplants. Also, visit my website at hairliciously.com to purchase your microneedling devices and thermals, both of which are scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth, my low-level laser therapy cap, hair growth supplements, DHT blocking shampoo and serum, and a few other products for those who are suffering from hair loss. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about Wayne Rooney and his 2 prior hair transplants and his current hair loss situation. There's been recent news from several UK tabloids that talk about his thinning hair despite spending nearly 30,000 pounds on 2 hair transplants, which is roughly equivalent to about a whopping $38,000 USD. So that is a lot of money to spend on just hair transplants for the average Joe. In my case, I think I spent probably half of that. But hair transplants do come at a hefty price, especially when you're one of the most famous and affluent British celebrity soccer players. So Wayne Rooney started balding at an early age, and if we take a look at his father to look for any genetic hair loss, we can clearly see male pattern hair loss running in his family. So hair loss really isn't a big shocker for Wayne. In fact, his hair loss seems to mimic the exact same hair loss pattern as his father, who appears to be somewhere between a Nord 4A with thinning on the mid-scalp and on the hairline. The interesting thing about Rooney is that even as a young boy growing up, he's always had a pretty noticeable recession on both temples, which I think is pretty uncommon for someone at that age. And the crazy thing is that even for younger men and even adolescents, you can sometimes just tell that they have a high chance of receding simply by looking at how their adolescent hairline is. So this won't be the case for every single person who's receding, but I think it's a good indicator of future progression of male pattern hair loss. And this was exactly the same case for Rooney. As he hit his early to mid 20s, he started experiencing a lot more hair loss, especially to his hairline and his mid scalp, resulting in somewhere between a Nord 3A to a 4A. So in 2011, he decided to get his very first FUA hair transplant at age 25. And he did get it at a UK clinic called Harley Street Hair Clinic. And several sources are reportedly saying that he paid nearly 15,000 pounds, which is a little under $20,000 USD. So he did get a rather conservative hairline with a pretty high hairline because, given his extent of hair loss at a young age, and as far as graft count, I'd probably place him somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500, solely focused on the hairline and a kind of like horseshoe design. And surprisingly, Rooney's actually he's been pretty open with his hair transplants with his fans, and he even tweeted that he did indeed get a hair transplant due to balding at a young age, and that he was pretty delighted with the results. So not a lot of celebrities who have reportedly had hair transplants aren't going to be as open as Rooney. So it's good to have somebody who isn't afraid to let people know that he did get a hair transplant to, obviously fix something that he's always been worried and concerned with. He did go back to the same clinic in 2013, 2 years later, to get a second FU hair transplant, as he was also balding behind the transplanted area of the mid-scalp and the crown. I can't confirm if Rooney was taking finasteride or not, but his clinic obviously does prescribe finasteride in the UK. And I would assume that Rooney would have been taking finasteride since his doctor most likely advised him that further hair loss is highly likely in his case due to aggressive hair loss early on. Finasteride was banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency from 2005 to 2009 to mask steroid use, but as of January 2009, the ban was actually lifted after improvements in testing methods was made, and they found out that the ban was unnecessary. So even as an athlete, there would be no restrictions for him on taking finasteride. So my speculation is that he probably was most likely on finasteride, but wasn't effective in stopping further hair loss given his aggressive hair loss and DHT sensitivity. So he continued to lose more and more hair over the years. And not everybody is going to be a good responder to finasteride, since DHT isn't the only cause for genetic hair loss. There are other androgens that are circulating in the body that also transcribe the same effects based on tissue selectivity, bonding affinities, and other androgens that are precursors to DHT, which can obviously bind to the androgen receptors and trigger hair loss. So you still have a lot of men who are taking finasteride, even dutasteride, which wipes out nearly 70% to 90% plus of DHT, and they're still balding. So anyway, the most recent news from the UK tabloid The Sun is that Wayne Rooney is still thinning despite having 2 hair transplants. There is a recent photo of him at a training event, and you guys can clearly see here some of the pretty diffuse thinning on his hairline and even the mid-scalp. He did, I think, lose a lot of ground as he continued to thin and miniaturize despite his 2 hair transplants. but I'm also fairly certain that he's also been using a lot of the hair loss concealers to create the illusion of a more dense hairline and the mid-scalp with the help of hair fibers. And because after his 2 hair transplants, he was still seen in several photos. Actually, the photos that you guys see here is just a day apart that show a pretty dense and thick head of hair on the left side of the photo. And on the right side, it shows pretty aggressive thinning and a lot of empty spots. So the only reasonable answer to this is that he's been using concealers quite a bit to add intensity and to thicken up his hair, especially during games and appearances. And you know, this is kind of like the same thing when it comes to David Beckham. A few weeks ago, I did cover a video of this where the UK tabloid also started, you know, criticizing him for having a full head of hair, and then all of a sudden he's been seen thinning again. So I think David Beckham also has been using concealers, and in the same case with Rooney, he's also been using concealers to kind of cover up the illusion of the fact that he's actually balding, so he can create more density. Now, when Rooney doesn't wear hair loss concealers, we can better visualize the true extent of his hair loss. And you know, to be honest, he doesn't really look like he has much donor hair left. He's obviously has very thin and wispy hair, which even if they were able to extract a few thousand grams of FUE, I don't think it's really going to give him the density that he needs to cover such an extensive area. He does seem to have good beard hair, which is always a good thing. So, you know, there are options for him through body hair transplantation to add more density later down the road if he chooses to. This is actually one of the most common fears a lot of people who have undergone hair transplants have. And also the same fear that I have. The fear and concern that the area, you know, behind the hair transplanted areas are going to continue to miniaturize and fall out, like in the case for Wayne Rooney. And this is a valid concern because, you know, especially for those who've had hair transplants and yet they are not being proactive to continue to halt further hair loss on the native areas, either through finasteride, dutasteride, or some type of androgen receptor inhibitors. And this just shows that even with a hair transplant, you're not going to cure hair loss. A hair transplant simply is going to redistribute DHT-resistant hair follicles to balding areas, and it's not going to do anything. It does absolutely nothing to the native areas. So if you're not following a proper hair loss treatment and prevention regimen, you're really just wasting your money, because you're going to end up having to continually play a game of catch up, and you know, you are going to eventually run out of donor hair because it is limited, and that's one of the main restrictions when it comes to hair transplantation. If you had an infinite number of donor hair through you know, either through stem cells or, you know, stem cell replication, there would be no problem just continually, you know, just transplanting hairs that you don't have, or even if you were able to obtain somebody else's hairs. But, you know, that's unfortunately not the case, and we are limited to a certain number of donor hair based on, you know, our hair characteristics, donor laxity. And so that is our main concern. So, you know, I think at this point, Rooney's options are pretty limited given his lack of donor hair. And I think that he would actually look better shaving it off, since there are a few photos of him circulating online with a buzzed head. And the good thing is that he at least has an established hairline. Even with a buzz cut, I think the hairline definitely is going to frame his face and put it into proportion. But, you know, that's not always easy to say, because some people try to cling onto the hairs. And, you know, this is why you see people that have aggressive hair loss, they still have that horseshoe in the back. And instead of just shaving it off, they still keep that little horseshoe in the back. And, you know, that's how they style their hair. But, you know, for Rooney's case, he can also offer SMP to add in more density, but I think that's his best bet. He obviously wasn't a good responder to hair loss medication if he was indeed on it. And given that his transplanted hairs also seem to have thinned out, he may just have to end up just throwing in the towel, in my opinion. That's all I have for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Wayne Rooney and his current hair loss situation. If you guys have any questions, you guys can shoot me an email at hairliciously@gmail.com, or find me on Instagram at hairliciously. That's usually where I respond a lot quicker. So thanks again, guys. I'll talk to you in my next video, and stay safe.